Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, desolators, peasants, vassals, minions. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to go back to Syria. And this entire plan of U.S. intervention in Iraq and Syria, now upcoming, is either diabolically brilliant, as I've discussed in previous videos, or incredibly inept. Or it may be a combination of the both, but this is playing out as we have imagined, and that is the U.S. will now inevitably get involved in the Syrian conflict. So now there are discussions in public, which means that once again the public is being massaged, and we're going to go in increments, and they're discussing airstrikes and involvement in Syria now. As a combined operation against ISIS, or the Islamic State, that now encompasses regions in Syria and Iraq. So there's an article that came out, New York Times today, discussing it, and one of their ideas is that to speed up arming, so-called training and arming, so-called moderate Syrian opposition, but as Barack Obama already spelled out, the entire idea of a moderate Syrian secular opposition has always been a fantasy, and it's strange to hear him couch it in those terms. But now, as a result of this James Foley beheading video, which is of dubious validity, there's some speculating that it might not be real. I kind of dismiss that in the sense that these are the kind of videos that ISIS posts, and that's just how it is. But the fact that the United States is using this as a catalyst for U.S. intervention in Syria now, of course, calls it into question. And they're saying that the James Foley video creates a, quote, new context, unquote. And that means that now they kill one American, and all of a sudden all the efforts before this, including trumped up chemical weapons attacks and the like, didn't work. But now one American is beheaded, and somehow it's enough for everybody to cheer on this new upcoming intervention. And in the article, they also go on to discuss the idea of arming the Syrian Kurds, the Kurds in Syria, as they are doing now the Kurds in Iraq. And that's rather interesting as well, after how many years now, 4 or 5 years of letting the Kurds in Syria hang out to dry and being massacred and kidnapped. And now, for some reason, the U.S. wants to utilize them themselves in opposition to ISIS. And so anyway, this is getting to be what we always refer to in my videos, at least, as a classic clusterfuck. And so they're also, the U.S. is talking about airstrikes, bombers, and even special forces ground troops, which means the more they justify the application of ground troops and special forces in Syria, the more and more we're going to get used to seeing increases in ground forces in Iraq as well. And they're also talking about drone strikes against ISIS leaders, like they do around the world. So obviously they've looked at an entire spectrum of new intervention, and any one of them qualifies as an act of war in Syria. So the U.S. is going to broaden its new war in Iraq with a new war in Syria, taking it to the next level. And one of the quotes in this article, too, is, quote, ISIS cannot be defeated without going into Syria, unquote, from a government spokesman. So now that's another way we're getting massaged and getting ready to be sold on the fact that ISIS has to be defeated. As I pointed out, they're the ultimate new boogeyman. They're now heavily armed thanks to the United States and Iraq. And now they have to be taken care of, and this is justifying this intervention. Another quote is from the government is, quote, we're considering what's going going to be necessary to deal with that threat, and we're not going to be restricted by borders, unquote. So that's a very key element. Now they see this caliphate as an entity. And the very borders that have been, Sykes-Picot borders that have been erased by the Islamic State are now going to be adapted by the United States, using it as a pretext for a two-country war in Iraq and Syria. And kind of reminds me of the whole situation in Vietnam as well, when it turns out the North Vietnamese were funneling troops and supplies in through routes through Laos and Cambodia. So the United States ended up secretly at the time. People don't realize that now, but at the time it was done secretly and only revealed later, to much disgrace. But an entire war in Laos, invasion of Laos, and a bombing of Cambodia. So this is very reminiscent of that, and we'll probably have similar results. But it's kind of funny that they're still talking about speeding up training and arming of moderate Syrian opposition, because they've been doing it for 4, 5, 6, 7 years now, and to speed it up seems like pointless. And as I said 2 weeks ago, Obama said, quote, "Arming rebels has always been a fantasy," unquote. And he said the administration had difficulty finding, training, and arming a sufficient cadre of secular Syrians. Quote, "There's not as much capacity as you would hope," unquote. That's an understatement. So essentially, like we figured out for quite some time, there really isn't much moderate Syrian opposition, and that's why the attempt to topple the Assad government in Syria had to be augmented by all these foreign fighters. Of course, they would gravitate to the situation anyway, but that's certainly one of the reasons why we have this hodgepodge of opposition in Syria, and the United States had everything to do with it because of multiple efforts on their part to train all sorts of different factions to go back into Syria, and one of them turned out to be the kernel for the growth of ISIS, or the Islamic State. And one of the things that's really complicated about this is now the goal is not to cripple or remove the Assad government in this U.S. intervention in Syria. So somehow the U.S. couldn't justify the intervention in Syria to topple the Assad government, but now it can be legitimized by going after the Islamic State. An irony there. But like I say, now the goal isn't to intervene in Syria to topple the Assad government. It's to attack the Islamic State. And ironically, Assad will gain from this episode if the United States starts attacking its only real opposition in Syria. And so once again, very complex, strange way these things work out in the difference between what the United States is trying to achieve in Iraq and what the United States is trying to achieve in Syria. And to add another layer of irony, of course, Assad himself has been focusing his military in attacks against the al-Nusra Front and other opposition groups in Syria, and essentially letting ISIS be for the time being, so that ISIS will destroy the other opposition that Assad has been attacking. And but that's not working out as well right now, because ISIS has gotten enough strength and enough weapons that they are taking on the Syrian government full on right now. So here we go. They're just buttering things up right now. My understanding from reading at least the mainstream media is that Obama seems to be reluctant, but that might be just the way they paint it, so that they can say he was going to go to war in Syria, kicking and screaming. But there we have it. U.S. Finally getting its war in Syria. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?